How's your weekend going? Welcome to the PHLY Eagles podcast presented by TrueMark Financial. Go to TrueMark.com to check out the rates. Thanks to them for sponsoring this free agency frenzy. Zach Berman, how's your working going?
That's going well. I'm excited to see you, though. This is a welcome departure.
All right, let's talk about it. Mekhi Becton officially leaves the Eagles, signs with the Los Angeles Chargers for what is reported to be a 2-year, $20 million deal. And now the Eagles, the Super Bowl is one thing. They're proud of that, but not as proud as they are of the fact that they are now in line for 4 compensatory picks in 2026. If you listen to the national reporters, this deserves another parade in Philadelphia, don't you think, Zach?
Yeah, I do think it's a little much. Like I'm seeing things like the Eagles have, they're figuring out the next competitive advantage, as if like the Baltimore Ravens haven't been using compensatory picks for the last, decade plus. But no, the Mekhi Becton departure, it's something we had been talking about, and I thought that when they acquired Kenyon Green, not to say Kenyon Green is the Becton replacement, but that it kind of signaled that they probably won't be able to go here. I know when he lingered on the market, there was a sentiment that maybe he could return, but this is in line with kind of what I was expecting for him in terms of getting 10 million or 10 million plus. We'll see what the numbers are in terms of guarantees, but I didn't think the Eagles were going to have 5 offensive linemen being paid 8-digit contracts, and I'm expecting a Cam Jurgens extension to come soon. But good for Mekhi Becton. He earned this.
Good for Mekhi Becton. It's actually, I think it's a little bit under what would have been a reasonable expectation, if he had signed early in free agency, given what some of the other bloated guard contracts have been. I think he was probably hurt by waiting and potentially waiting on the Eagles. But if you just think about this from the Eagles' perspective, given everything that they have signaled and the places that they are trying to save money, they're not going to pay that much money for a guard when they're paying 4 other offensive linemen at the top of the market. And it should be a position where, with Jeff Stoutland, you've got the relative ease of playing next to Lane Johnson and Cam Jurgens. You should be able to find somebody on a rookie contract, or at least a meager veteran contract, to be fine at that position.
You're right, and I think that's a really good point about playing between Lane and obviously Jurgens before this Kelsey, because I know there's been this revolving door of right guards for the Eagles, and that might be part of the reason why. Like, they might look at that as a position that is, I don't want to say easy to put someone in there, but when you're playing between those 2 players, you should be able to handle it. Now, yeah, you hit it on the head. If Landon Dickerson was on a rookie contract, maybe the calculus is different here, and the Eagles would pay their right guard more. But once they pay Landon Dickerson what they did last year, I didn't think they were going to have 2 guards, being paid $30 million combined, right? So that would be especially ambitious when you consider that Jurgens is about to get a new deal. But the outcome for the Eagles, you signed Mekhi Becton after the draft last year, ostensibly at the time as a swing tackle, earns this guard spot. You get a Super Bowl season out of him, like real productive guard play. And now you're going to get a 5th round pick, presumably as a comp pick for him. Like that's a great outcome for the Eagles. And it's a great outcome for Mekhi Becton to really turn his career around. And he's going to a place that I think he can really flourish.
Yeah, let's talk about Becton first, and then we'll get into where they stand at right guard. We'll get into the picks themselves, and then we will also touch on at the end the other players the Eagles signed yesterday, those minor signings. But on Becton himself, first of all, it was an impressive season for him as a run blocker. He brought a lot to the table and was a real difference maker there. You could debate about whether he was at fault on some pass protection stuff, but no doubt about it, like, solidified the offensive line, and you saw what it meant to him after being in NFL hell with the New York Jets and what those first 4 years of his career were like. And I think everybody's lasting memory of him will be sitting on the field crying as they won the Super Bowl, right? Just seeing how everything meant to him. But you're probably right. The Chargers are a good place for him to land. They like to run the ball. That'll be a good thing. I just think that from the Eagles' perspective, even beyond, okay, they're really trying to save money, like, that whole Becton experiment is the case of building up a guy's value and letting him move on. You don't then pay that guy at the apex of his market, right? it is an example of the way that you are able to sort of bring people in and get the most out of them. And let's just sort of keep doing that.
I hear your point. I'm not trying to disagree. Where I would push back a bit, and I don't think you mean it this way. But I don't think it's just this Eagles machine that he's the product of. Like I think he has special ability, right? So like
I
Tyler
agree with
Steen
that.
wasn't,
Yeah.
if Tyler Steen was the right guard last year and he became a free agent, I don't think Tyler Steen turns into a $10 million a year player. Like I think Mekhi Becton had, and we'll see this year or these
Yeah, I don't know
next 2
about that,
years
but
could be an example, but. Mekhi Becton, I think had special tools that allowed him to flourish here. So I think he deserves a lot of the credit. But you are absolutely correct. Like he was strategic in picking the Eagles, right? Jeff Stoutland maximized him. The Eagles put him in position to accentuate what he does well. A, putting him at guard. B, the run heavy offense that they had. And yeah, so it's really it's like something that worked out exceedingly well for both sides.
all right, now where do the Eagles stand at right guard? We have talked about this week, but there's Kenyon Green, who they got in the C.J. Gardner-Johnson trade. There is Tyler Steen. There are other guys on the roster like Trevor Keegan, last year's 5th-round pick, or Darian Kennard, who they brought in. And then, of course, there is the possibility of drafting somebody in the draft. What do you think is the most likely outcome for the Eagles starter in Week 1?
Yeah, I've been saying Kenyon Green this week, and I could be wrong. I haven't even watched him play with the Eagles yet, right? But he has the most starting experience of that group. The age profile's intriguing to me. Now, Tyler Steen, the Eagles drafted Tyler Steen. It's a 3rd-round pick, but it was like top of the 3rd round. They didn't have a 2nd-round pick that year, or they traded out of the 2nd round. The Eagles don't typically, when they're taking someone that high, the expectation is that he becomes a starting player. And we thought that was going to be the case last year. And frankly, some players just take longer to develop. Isaac Seumalo, if we had a conversation after year 2 of Isaac Seumalo, we're not talking about him as the type of guard that he has gone on to become. But once he developed and he kind of got comfortable there, he turned into a really valuable NFL player. The same could be said about Tyler Steen. I'm just leaning toward Kenyon Green right now. And that's not something anyone told me. It's just kind of based on they've seen Steen. They moved Becton over last year. I'm curious to see if Kenyon Green can have a Becton-like jump this year.
I think that's a reasonable stance to have if you're trying to think of like following the Mekhi Becton blueprint, like a huge guy with 1st-round caliber tools in his body, as the Eagles would say.
Yeah.
That is a nice thing. We know that Jeff Stoutland wants sort of those, outliers on the offensive line. We know from 2 years that for whatever reason, the Eagles or Jeff Stoutland, they don't love Tyler Steen. Otherwise, he would have been starting last year. That doesn't mean that he can't go win the job and look good, but that is, that is part of what we know about how this has worked out for a few years. I do think that still, if the Eagles could have their ideal meeting of need and value in their at 32, or if they trade back a little bit, I still think it would be a potential Lane Johnson replacement who could start at right guard. Now we'll see how this draft works out in that favor, but I do think that is still a thing that they would very much like to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the draft is certainly a place to look there. And for the reason you said, the same logic that we applied last year applies this year. Now, I know that Lane Johnson has kind of been on record saying he's hoping to play 2 more years here, so maybe that window is a little longer than we might have thought a year ago. This offensive line draft isn't the same as it was a year ago, but you're talking about the 30s here, where you don't, it's not the top of the draft. It's how the value is there. So you very well might see a tackle or a guard. Now the other thing I'll say is if you're, Jedrick Wills, and not to say I don't know if Jedrick Wills can play guard, but this track record that Jeff Stoutland has, not just Mekhi Becton, like Halapoulivaati Vaitai turned into like a $50 million a year player, or I'm sorry, not $50 million a year, $50 million contract player. Isaac Seumalo got a real good deal. Like if players who come here, play for Jeff Stoutland, go on and earn contracts elsewhere. There's a track record of this. So if you're a guy at the crossroads of his career, or you're not getting the value you want, it's kind of like how Jim Schwartz used to talk about defensive tackles in his scheme. If you come here under Jeff Stoutland, there is evidence that if you have talent, he will extract it from you. So maybe there's another post-draft signing, depending on how the draft goes.
All right, let's talk about the draft picks now. As everybody with a microphone will tell you, the Eagles now have 20 draft picks projected over the next 2 drafts. There's 8 this year, all of their own picks in the first 3 rounds, a 4th rounder from the Lions, and then 4 5th-round picks, all in like an 8-pick span. And then next year, in addition to the picks that they have themselves, you have the 3rd-round pick from the Jets from the Hassan Reddick deal, and you now have projected comp picks in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. Now, we'll see if that actually comes to pass. I guess my question for you, Zach, is probably not, since the Eagles are being so chest puffy about this, but like I think there might have been a hope internally that Becton would sign a big enough deal that it might be like on like the 4th round border. Now that it's a 5th, would you consider, like, there's not a lot of guys left, but we have talked a lot about Azeez Ojulari, who's there and would probably cost a canceled comp pick, maybe a 5th, maybe a 6th. Like, are you so protective of these 5th and 6th round comp picks that you wouldn't still be doing that? Or is it just, we know that they're not trying to spend money, they're not going to be involved in any of that stuff?
Yeah, not the 5th and 6th ones. I'm sorry. I would not be so protective of the 5th and the 6th ones. The 3rd and 4th ones, yeah, I'd be very protective of those. Like, I wouldn't trade a 3rd round pick right now or a 4th round pick right now for Azeez Ojulari if he were a trade candidate. But a 5th or 6th round,
but he won't cost a 3rd. The 3rd for sure is.
Yeah. So my point is, I'm with you there. I would not be so protective of the 5th and 6th round pick.
Yeah, nor would I, but I do think that what they've signaled is, they're not going to be signing guys like that, right?
I also want to use this forum to address something like regarding the comp picks, just to kind of clarify. These are projected comp picks, so you can't trade them now. Right. But what you can do is, because you're projecting them, you could be a little more liberal in trading your 3rd round picks, or both your 3rd round picks, a 3rd round pick. Or you could trade your 4th round pick, or you could trade a 6th round pick next year, knowing that you're going to have or expecting an addition, the additional pick to come. So in your internal accounting, if you look at 3 3rd round picks, you can be aggressive trading that Jets pick or trading your pick, knowing you'll get that 3rd round comp pick.
Yeah. How many turkeys would you put right now on the Eagles trading, let's say, either of their 2 3rd rounders or their 4th rounder before the trade deadline is over this season?
80 turkeys.
Wow.
Yeah. Because I think it could be used as a package to move up in this year's draft, right? And then the other thing too, and the Eagles showed this last year, is that when Howie has picks to work with on day 3, he will trade for future picks. This is something that he's always done. So he'll trade back from like the 5th to the 6th round and add a 5th the next year or something like that. Like, this is it's something he's always been willing to do on draft day, and I would expect Howie to navigate that. But I do think they'll trade a 3rd at some point.
We got default Mike Weber in the chat, who says he loves a Saturday pod because it means he can finally join live, and he wants to know, why isn't Zach in the Newhouse Hall of Fame yet? Let's go.
Yeah. I'm flattered that you ask. There's a lot of really impressive people from Newhouse, far more impressive than anything I've accomplished so far.
How dare you?
That would be wonderful to be honored because of the company that you would join. But it's honestly, Newhouse doesn't ask much of me, honestly. I mean, I'm kind of like an afterthought from their perspective. But I appreciate the sentiment. And WAER, which is the radio station there, honestly, I was like the 8th guy on the bench, so to speak. There was such a talented staff there. Daily Orange, I probably had more of an effect than WAER, but I appreciate the sentiments very much, Michael.
I do find the, taking out an ad in the newspaper about how many comp picks we're getting after you just won the Super Bowl to be a little bit off-putting. You don't need to. You just won the Super Bowl.
Exactly. And you don't need to say, hey, 2026, we're in good shape, right? Like, that's not, there's
a lot. We've sort of seen a lot of this offseason, Zach, in the pre-defensiveness from the Eagles organization when they just won the Super Bowl.
I've always thought like this is, you're talking about like team slogans, that kind of thing, or like. I've always thought that if I was running the team, if I was Howie Roseman or I was Don Smolenski, I would go to the marketing department. I would take out a billboard on 76 or 95 or 676. I would just put the Lombardi Trophy.
20 picks in the next 2 years.
No, and I would just write "enough said." Right, like that's it, right there. Like that's all you need to say. You won the Super Bowl here. There's gonna be like this, yeah. You don't need to tell me about how well stocked you are in the third round, in the fourth round, the fifth round of 2026 draft. I get it. And so much can change between now and then. You say like, look, this is what we planned for this year. This was going to be a maintenance year. Frankly, if you want to kind of rationalize the roster, you say, look, we still have Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley and A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith. Like you go on down the list. The Eagles roster is probably still the best in the NFL right now, right? You don't need to tell me about the comp pick you're getting in 2026.
We're gonna have 2 banners in the link this year. One, Super Bowl champions. The other one, 2026 6th round pick coming for Isaiah Rodgers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not. Look, I understand that you can try to justify and rationalize, but I'm not the one getting criticized or getting scrutinized here, so it might be easy.
It's a misdirection. It's a misdirection because they're not spending any money. That's what it is.
Exactly.
Which is fine. That's their choice, but that's what it is.
Yeah, but I think this is what I would say. The people who would be swayed by the comp pick argument are going to love you no matter what. And the people who are criticizing you are not going to get excited about the comp picks, right? Like that's a fight you're not going to win or lose.
All right, very quickly, 2 minor signings from yesterday that we have not yet talked about. One of them, I would say, more important from a what could happen next standpoint, and that is former Colts tight end Kylen Granson, who actually played quite a bit last season, but was not productive and was actually sort of like the Quez Watkins, Jahan Dotson level of tight ends in terms of where he ranked like in yards per route run. I think he only ended up with, I got to pull it up here, 14 catches or whatever it was, but he was playing a bunch of snaps. Was also not asked to block a ton. So this is not a guy who was like their blocking specialist. That was Mo Alley Cox. And so this is a guy who was just running routes and was not getting targeted. But as you look at what are the Eagles going to do with Dallas Goedert, they have now added 2 capable, playable veteran tight ends. And this week, do you think that this is further signal that Dallas Goedert is on the way out?
Yeah, I do. And not to say that Granson or Harrison Bryant are your replacements for Dallas Goedert per se, but here you've added, I don't want to say like major draft pedigree, but Granson's a former 4th round pick. Same thing with Harrison Bryant, right? These are like NFL tight ends. That's kind of been these aren't guys who've been on practice squads. These are NFL tight ends, and so it's a way of kind of draft proofing that position, combining with Grant Calcaterra. And also we spoke about the Colts. Like this is a guy who played for the Colts last year who's no longer there, and the Colts are a team that is looking for a tight end, or the Colts are a team that continues to look for a tight end. So I don't take this as like, oh, they're set now at tight end if they move Goedert because they got Granson and because they got Harrison Bryant. But it's another capable body at a position that, honestly, if you look at last year, like they waited a while to add C.J. Uzomah. They really didn't have the type of depth at that position going in the camp that you're typically thinking of. They lost Jack Stoll. They replaced him with Uzomah. Now you're going to go into camp, presumably, even if Goddard's not here, with 3 tight ends who've played meaningful NFL snaps in Calcaterra, Harrison Bryant, and Kylen Granson, which is different than a year ago.
Yeah, 14 catches for 182 yards last season for Granson. Year before that was more productive, 30 catches for 368 yards. And as I mentioned before, all the tight ends who ran at least 200 routes this year, there were 44 of them. Granson was 41st in yards per route run, but 2 spots ahead of Michael Mayer. So there you go.
And a good athletic profile coming out. I'm looking at the mock draftable now. Oh, he's actually listed here with the spider charts with fullbacks and not with tight ends, interestingly. So that affects the percentiles, but 87th percentile vertical jump, 90th percentile broad jump, 81st percentile 40-yard dash, 87th percentile 2-cone drill. So like there's an athletic profile here that you're building on.
Are you sticking on yesterday's 88 turkeys on Dallas Goedert being elsewhere next season?
Yes, I am.
All right, there you go. Last one, Patrick Johnson, old friend, back in the nest. He's going to get a Super Bowl ring, and he's going to get to be here for it. Patrick Johnson, special team standout. What do you make of that?
Yeah, an engagement ring too, right? Didn't you say he just or a wedding ring rather? Well, he just had his
wedding ring. Yeah,
in Colombia. Yeah, good for him. Congratulations. Good week. Patrick Johnson, someone who was like respected here among the players. Every July and August, we would talk about him because he would make plays during training camp. Wasn't really a factor in games, but he's someone who, like you said, can contribute on special teams. Can be a depth pass rusher. You were surprised if memory serves when they moved on from him last year. Maybe they thought they can get him through.
I think that was a miscalculated release. I think they were bummed that the Giants claimed him.
Exactly. Giants claimed him, and so now now they have a chance to bring him back, and they do. I imagine there's probably interest on his end in coming back if because I can't imagine the money's that high. So yeah, I don't think he's guaranteed to make the roster, but he's someone who they've deemed at least three of the past 4 years as a rosterable player, and the New York Giants considered a rosterable player last year.
There you go. All right. Little Saturday action for you. So that'll do it. We'll get going. If there's bigger news to come, we'll be here. But for now, that'll close it out. Thanks to TrueMark Financial for sponsoring this podcast. Go to TrueMark.com for rates. And to learn more, TrueMark Financial, federally insured by the NCUA, equal opportunity lender. Rates are subject to change. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Zach. We'll talk to you later. And as always, we love you.
We all silly like the mayor.